this morning. Uh-oh. Okay. Let's see, Susan, or do you know what our quorum is?
It's Roger
Or Roger, who knows what our quorum is?
or Samantha. 6. Okay.
You know
one
it because, pardon me?
We are one shy.
How many
I
is
think we
our
have
quorum?
7.
6.
6.
6. Okay. All right. I know you know because you've had to cancel meetings because we didn't have a quorum. We'll get it. Whitney's getting on, so.
I'm here.
Great. Good morning.
Good
Yeah.
morning.
We do it at night and then we do it in the morning.
We do.
And the interesting thing is we've had both pension boards this week. Roger and Susan and Aaron and I. It's pension week. Oh, okay. Let's see. Well, it is just 10 o'clock. So did I hear this is not a public meeting? Is that correct or not correct?
It's not being televised, if that's what you mean. But
Okay, but it is a public meeting, correct?
Yeah, the link's been distributed.
Okay, so one last time then, maybe last time, I'm going to open with our COVID statement. I thought I did that last night, but so welcome everyone to the Board of Trustees City Employee Pension Fund Board special meeting. And this is June 11th, 2021, and I'll open with our teleconference statement. Due to the COVID-19 state of emergency, this meeting is being held via live video teleconference pursuant to 2020 Senate Bill 150 and in accordance with KRS 61.826. Welcome everyone. And we have a full agenda today. And so we will get right to it. We have a quorum. And the first thing we'd like to discuss is in-person meetings and ask this Board of Trustees to make a decision as to whether we want to go back to in-person meetings. Boards and commissions have the option of staying virtual or going in person. So I'll open the floor up to discussion. I know you all have opinions on this. Councilmember Lamb.
I'm ready. Let's go back.
Ready to go back? Is anybody else ready to go back?
I agree. I think that it's time.
Okay. I see Councilmember Kloiber raising or shaking his head. I did want to ask, I had heard that there were some retirees who had difficulty getting to in-person. I don't know. Samantha, do you have any input on that?
Yes, Ms. Lang didn't have access to a computer, and I actually spoke with her yesterday. And I informed her that we were considering returning to in-person as of the July 27th meeting. And she seemed open to that.
Okay. Charlene, what are your thoughts? Oh, can you unmute yourself? Maybe I can unmute you. We can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, no, I think it's fine to go back if everyone there feels comfortable. If that's what's going to be happening with other meetings, I think it would be fine.
Okay, now David, you don't live here, right? But
I don't know.
But are you able? You're able to get here. You were able to get here before. If we
Yeah.
go back in
Yeah.
person.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, would someone, I'll entertain a motion that we start in-person meetings with our July the 27th meeting then.
So move.
Second.
All right, and Councilmember Baxter seconded. Is there any further discussion? All right, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Is anyone opposed? Nope. Okay, July the 27th will be here. And Samantha, I don't know if we used to meet on the 12th floor in that conference room. If it's still available, that might be a comfortable place.
Yeah, I'll reach out to
Okay.
General Services.
Thank you very much. All right. Okay, now, next up, we have minutes of the February 26th, 2021 meeting. And I'd like to first entertain a motion to approve, and then we'll discuss them.
So moved.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Kloiber, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Councilmember Baxter. Now, are there any changes, corrections, additions at all? I had sort of forgotten the meeting, but I saw that I did chair it, so I was there. You know, these months seem like years. All right, if there's nothing, then all those in favor, please raise your hand. Anyone opposed? All right, that motion passes. Now, we have our third quarter expenses. And do we need a motion to approve that? It says FYI, but does that require action? It doesn't, does it?
I don't think so. No.
No,
Okay.
it does not.
All right, so are there any questions about it? It's in your packet. No? All right. All right, let's move on to ratification of the transfer of estimated payroll for April through June 2021. And this will require a motion.
So move.
Thank you, Councilmember Lamb. Is there a second? Councilmember Kloiber. Let's have some discussion. Is there any? It looks very different, Aaron, Commissioner, from Police and Fire, doesn't it? All right, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Anybody opposed? Okay, that motion passes. And next is an FYI, the memorandum of funeral benefits for Margaret Hunter. Susan, did you have any comment about this? They're really, it's informational. There really aren't benefits attached, correct?
That is correct.
Mhm. So that is informational. And she lived to a very nice old age of 98. So next, I will ask Samantha to address our 2020 board member election update.
It's a very short update.
Okay.
I tried to reach out to the fourth elected candidate, Ms. Moses. I did not establish contact by mail or phone. I tried over a month.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what should our next step be then? Do we need
Was
to-
there another person in line in the election after Betty Moses?
I believe there were only 4 on the official ballots.
So okay, so we probably need to fill that slot, right?
Can we legally move to the next person? I mean, without any,
I think the issue is there wasn't anybody else on the ballot. Is that the issue, Samantha?
That's correct. There were just 4 persons, and the 3 that were elected, and Betty Moses was the 4th.
Mhm.
oh, okay.
Okay, Councilmember Lamb.
Samantha, can you remind me who the other, I know one is Miss Summers and one is Miss Lang, and who is the third, please?
Ms. Corrigan.
Oh, but she passed
see-
away.
And
Yeah.
see Miss Moses was she going to take her place?
Yes, she was going to
So-
take Miss Corrigan's
Yes.
place on the board.
This is the
So,
problem that we've been waiting for it to happen, and it's
And-
happening, so.
and it's not going to get better. So, can you remind me of the process we went through to have those 4 nominees? Did you send out ballots, or you sent something to retirees to ask for nominations? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. I believe it's in, and I'm not sure, it's been a while, so based off my memory, I believe it was in November. We sent out the nomination forms. People were allowed to nominate themselves or other people. And from there, at this point, we took everyone that had votes.
Mhm.
Like, I think it was more than one, I'm not sure. There was one candidate who, and again, I'll have to look into this and I can try to look now. I believe she nominated herself,
Mhm.
but did not receive any votes
Mhm.
in the actual ballot, if that makes sense.
Mhm. I have a question for you, Roger. Are all those parameters set by the state statute, the number of retirees?
The number of retirees is set by statute. It says, actually, I've got a copy of the statute in there that we were going to talk about with proposed amendments. So
Right.
3 is the required number. It says employees or retirees in the statute. So I think we tried to address that contingency last time we amended the ordinance, that the person, until those seats were filled, you would have a holdover. But obviously, I believe our incumbent is no longer on the board for that seat. So the only alternative at this point to fill it would be with a special election, which we also addressed the procedures when we amended the ordinance last time. As you may recall, it used to be you had to have, I believe, 2 or 3 persons nominate, and we weren't getting enough nominations. So we amended it to allow for self-nominations or just one person to nominate, and then added in the special election ability before. That was the amendments we put through, I believe, in 2017 to the ordinance.
Okay. I mean, it seems that we probably need to do a special election and see if we can get someone to,
I believe so, because we don't have an
Sure.
incumbent to hold over in that particular seat. I believe our incumbent is the member that passed away, correct?
yes.
Yes.
And if I may, Ms. Summers, I was mistaken in the number of people on the ballot. We did have 5 total on the ballot. It was the 3 that were elected, Betty Moses. And then the 5th one was Dana Hoffmaster, and she did not receive any votes. So she was on the ballot, but did not get any votes in the actual election.
She was who I was thinking about. I thought I saw remembered that from the ballot, that she was on the ballot. And I know she's been on this board before
Yes,
in
and
years past.
when I had spoken, and I don't know how this will work with the processes, but when I spoke to her in regards of the nomination, she did express interest in serving on the board.
Okay,
Yes.
well,
Yes.
could we, within our rights, ask her to serve? Since she was on the ballot, or would we have to? She didn't receive any votes, so we'd have to have an election. Councilmember Lamb?
Did Charlene, did Dana, did she move back to Kentucky? Because I know at one time she was down in,
It's my understanding she lives in Georgetown.
Is she
Now,
back in
I have
Georgetown?
not spoken with her, but that was my understanding. And obviously, if she expressed interest on being on the board, I would think she must live in a reasonable distance.
Well, she used to drive from Tennessee.
Right.
I mean,
Oh.
back in the day.
So, what,
She lives in Georgetown.
the technicality is she was on the ballot but didn't get any votes. Is that correct? Could we, Roger, do you think we are within our right to ask her to serve, or do we need to go through an election and have her on the ballot?
Is there, I know Ms. Coleman has tried, but since the person that did get the next most votes, we haven't been able to make contact. Do we
Mhm.
want to maybe just pass this for one more month and try to see if we can get in touch with her and see if she's willing to serve? Try one more time?
Ms. Moses, you mean?
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, otherwise I would think we would probably have to have a special election if the
Okay.
next candidate didn't get any votes.
Mhm. Does that, I'll ask our board members, does that work for you all to ask Ms. Coleman to try to get in touch with Ms. Moses again? And see if we can't, talk with her. And then we could decide at our July meeting what the next step will be, whether we need to do a special election or not. Does that work for everybody or not? Yes. Susan?
I think that the other thing too, Samantha, I'll reach out to some people over in fire that maybe might know Betty, and we'll see if we can't go another route and trying to get in touch with her.
Okay,
Um,
that would be
I
great.
mean, I'll see if I can help with that, facilitate that. Okay.
Thank
Okay,
you.
that's great. I think this challenge is only going to get bigger. And so we need to be thinking about that. I mean, there will come a day, I think, when we don't have three persons to serve in that role. So that'll be a ways down the pike, so to speak. But okay, very good. Now, Roger Wright, proposed ordinance changes. Thank you, Samantha.
Yes, Mayor. I tried to just to put in maybe some ideas from some of the discussions that we had at the last meeting, some of the challenges that Ms. Coleman was having with getting into contact with people that were being nominated to make sure in the short time frame that they had to see if they wanted to be on the ballot. And then also to just go ahead and address by the ordinance the situation that we had come up this last time. And then also I put a copy of the statute as it's currently drafted in there, and then with some underlying language, tried to suggest maybe an amendment that would address the problem that may come up in the future, where if we have any one of the seats or three of the seats that are unable or unwilling to serve, that we simply move to an appointment system with the advice of with the consent of the council.
Do you want to go ahead and just walk us through the underlined parts, and so we can remind ourselves, and maybe there will be questions for you.
Okay, well, the first attachment in there is section 649 from our ordinance. And I tried to look into the past as far as the 1992 dates in there. I left those in. I'm assuming that's probably when we had gotten to a point, maybe there was no more active employees, because there is an ordinance that used to cover active employees. We had to have that actually had required different divisions. I can't remember exactly what it said, but the appointments or the election for active employees were from different divisions within the government. And then, so I'm assuming back around 92 is this probably when we went to a total retiree system. So I tried to leave those dates in there, but move to a system that gave the clerk's office a little bit more time when to send out the nominations. And then once we got them back, to give the clerk time to confirm that the persons that were nominated actually wanted to be involved in the election, and to get a declination if they didn't, only include people that really wanted to run on the ballot if they didn't self-nominate. And then to address the issue that we had here is that after the official election actually occurred, one of the successful candidates passed away, just to go ahead and embed in the ordinance that you would just go to the next vote, highest vote total person for that seat. So again, this was just some proposed language or maybe some things for people to think of, other than maybe having to have a special election where 2022 will be the next time we actually have to do one. So there's some time to consider this. And then for the statute, what I've tried to do was just to address the circumstance where since it requires retirees be elected for those seats, that if we get to a point where we can no longer fill those seats with retirees, to come up with an alternate system. And I had just thought to propose where the mayor fills those seats with the county residents, subject to approval of the council, like we do other boards. But again, those are just suggested languages for maybe things for thought. We can, we could go another route. I think just putting the statute out there in the ordinance maybe lets the board members think about it and see if they think that there's a better way to address these issues. But it's a starting point.
Okay. So are there any, Roger, are there any rules about making changes to this document? Do we have to present at one meeting and vote on it the next meeting or anything like that?
I will double check with Keith, but I'm not aware of anything. I think it would just be if have a vote to put it into Legistar if there was an approval for the ordinance change, and then it would just go through the council process. As far as the statute, my recollection from police and fire is we would just vote to move things forward to the attempt to get a bill sponsor. This is how we've done that in the past.
Okay. We might get the same one who we get to change the name of the other pension fund. Make it easy. Okay, let's, are there questions or comments, or this'll take, it's a real procedure then. If I understand correctly, this board would approve it and send it to council, correct? For
Yes,
approval.
we would vote on it to present it to council for consideration of proposed ordinance amendment. And we could look at other, when I looked back through the chapter, obviously this has been in there since merger. There's probably a lot of things still on the books that, like in other sections of the code, that probably don't apply anymore. Some of it could be cleaned up or moved to repeal, but I think this is probably just the main thing to do because obviously this pension fund has been around since merger.
So I saw a note, Abigail Allen has a question. I didn't realize she was on. Where are you, Abigail? Or is that you, Samantha?
I believe Abby's attending, but she's in the office and does not have a webcam.
Oh.
So she's watching from the sidelines.
Abby, do you want to run down to my office or where? Oh, here you come.
Yeah. Hello.
Good morning. We missed you last night, but Samantha did a great job.
She did do an excellent job.
Yeah.
Yes, I was so thankful that she could step in.
Yeah.
So I did have a question, and I hope my internet is okay. I'm in the office, so I'm using the government Wi-Fi. So I think that confirming the nominees is a great idea. We definitely need to do that. But I have a question. What if we run into a scenario where we can't confirm the nominees in that time frame, or say, we can't confirm one or any of the nominees? Do we solicit more names at that point, or how would our office go about handling that?
Well, that's why I tried to sort of leave some of the deadlines the same, but built in some time. The original ordinance didn't address when we sent out the nominations. I'm assuming we could do that as early as we wanted.
Okay.
That's why I added that in and tried to give that more time than that 10 days that we had before.
Okay.
I would be open to suggestion. I really didn't think of that. If you couldn't get in touch with somebody, but they've been nominated, I don't know that I would necessarily feel comfortable leaving that person off of the ballot.
Right.
There would probably just be a situation where if that person refused to be seated, then you would treat that as a declination and then just go to the next highest vote getter.
Okay.
But I would think it would be best to try to confirm. If we couldn't get a hold of them, I wouldn't feel comfortable not putting them on the election ballot. Then if they got elected and refused to serve, then I think we would just go to the next lowest vote getter would probably be the easiest process.
Okay.
But it seems like the last several years, it's not been a challenge of having too many candidates. It's been a challenge of having too few.
Right. And I think, we will run into that more as the number of retirees decreases. So, just kind of planning ahead for that scenario.
So do you think this works, Abby, this language?
I do. I think so long as it leaves it open. kind of open enough for our office to kind of troubleshoot any scenario that comes up, and then, you know, finding that sweet spot where it's open and vague enough, but also, you know, specific enough so our office knows what to do. And if we come into those issues, we can always consult Roger or, you know, or the board and see how they would like to proceed.
Okay. Okay.
And similarly, it says that if the retiree does not consent, then we request that they confirm in writing. Some of the issue is people not returning paperwork. So if we speak to them and they decline, if we haven't received their paperwork by the time that the ballots need to go out, can we safely not include them?
I realized that would be a challenge. That's why I tried to put the safety catch in there that says if they were successful, I would probably include them on the ballot, but then if they won and they were unwilling to serve, they refused, we would still have the procedure where we went to the next highest vote getter. I tried to come up with a scenario where we covered all the bases, so to speak. I don't want to, I wouldn't want to exclude somebody who, for whatever reason, even though we had that additional time, we just couldn't get a hold of them in between the nomination and the election. So again, it's probably not a perfect solution, but I tried to cover all the bases, but still tried to, you know, obviously give everybody the opportunity to be nominated and elected and serve without excluding somebody by error or by omission, so to speak.
Sure.
Okay.
So I guess my other question, just so if we are not able to confirm anybody and then they were on the ballot and we don't get, say we can't get a hold of them to confirm that they want to serve, that would just be like a taciturn denial, I guess, like they would be denying service.
I suppose we could put a time deadline that if we were unable to confirm their willingness to serve within, say, 60 or 90 days after the December 1st. I don't know. Typically we see it in January. We've already got the default language where until something's confirmed, the incumbent holds the seat.
Okay.
I don't know that there's a perfect solution. If we wanted to say, if we couldn't confirm prior to when the board votes to confirm the seat, then the next person would be, I suppose I could work on that language, try to come up with something. It's a unique circumstance. It's hard to come up with all the potential. So that's why I was trying to come up with some sort of default language at the end where that next person would always get the seat if we couldn't work those things out. But I'm open to suggestions, obviously. I'm just trying to come up with some language here to address all the contingencies.
Abigail, would you like for Roger to work on that sort of language, or
Yes.
We could look at it again at our next meeting.
Okay, that would be great.
Anything else on this piece? What about do you want to go on, Roger, the change to the 67A.320?
Yes, it's all in paragraph 4 on the second page. I put the whole statute on there just so you all can see. This is really your all's governing statute, and it's the one we've discussed in the past where the rest of the fund goes to the police and fire fund.
We've not forgotten that.
This is your governing document, so that's why I put the whole thing on there, because if we go to the General Assembly and there's other concerns about the statute, it's probably best to ask all at once. I know we were only talking about the retirees, but I wanted to go ahead and put the board, because we get questions sometimes where these requirements come from. This is sort of your all's bedrock statute. I only put some suggested language in here with respect to the retiree issue, but if we, you know, all the members may want to review the statute. If they have other concerns they'd like to address, if we do approach the General Assembly next session, that may be the time to approach them on any other concerns. I know we're only looking at the retirees today, but this is your statute. If there are other concerns that people want to look at between now and when we would try to get a bill sponsor.
So the piece you put in the event that one or more employees of retirees can't be filled. Let's talk about that for a moment. It would sort of revert to the way all of our boards and commissions are. The mayor nominates, the council approves.
Yeah, I mean, my only other thought is the only other, I guess, really interested group in this fund would be survivor beneficiaries or other dependent beneficiaries. I don't know how large of a group or a class that is and whether or not that putting that in at this time would solve that problem, because I don't know how many of those people would be willing to serve either. And I don't really know the size of that group. I mean, obviously, if one of those persons were interested, the mayor could always appoint them.
Mhm. Susan, do you know? She's looking.
Susan Combs has it. Yeah.
I have my laptop up, so give me 2 seconds.
No worries.
We have 30.
30.
We have 30 widows. We have 11 retirees.
But
So,
okay.
and
Roger, were you referring to then other beneficiaries? Like, or is that not?
Well, I just meant anybody that would still be getting some sort of an actual benefit from the fund other than the actual retired employee themselves. But the mayor, I mean, without knowing how large of a class that is or whether they'd be willing to serve, if we amended the statute and limited to that, we're still probably maybe limiting some future board on the ability to fill those seats. So, I mean, those are things always a mayor can consider and who he or she would want to appoint.
Mm-hmm.
But I tried to give the most flexibility we could with this particular language, other than just, saying that it would be typically, I think most of our boards and commission members are residents of the county. So I did put that language in there, but obviously that wouldn't be necessary. We could just leave it to generally to the.
Susan, could you say again how many retirees and how many spousal?
we have 11 retirees.
Okay.
That we currently pay, and we have 30 beneficiaries, which are widows.
Okay.
And their ages range. So, I mean, there is a large enough group that I think that I would want them to be our second line of defense and actually being on the board, because they have a vested responsibility in this pension because they're receiving a pension. So my personal thought was give the widows an option to run first and then do the election, then do appointments. But that's my personal opinion.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. Right. Councilmember Lamb.
Well, Susan just said what I was going to say. I wanted to suggest that we put in that level, and I do think that that is the exact thing we need to do. And I don't know, I get what you're saying, Roger, is, I mean, if they're a member of the county, if they live in the county, then the mayor could just by that means alone could appoint them. But I think that they need to be made as the next level of participant on this board because of their invested interest. So, and if that needs to be, I guess, I don't know if that's a motion that you need for that or
Quick question, would the prefer, and I can make that proposed language and add it next month again for everybody to look at. Would you prefer as a group to stay with an election from that secondary group of persons, or move to that the mayor would be limited in the selection for appointments unless people in that group weren't willing to serve? I don't know that it's possible. I was just trying to come up with some kind of language that covered all the future that would carry this fund through for those particular 3 seats.
I think that having it, going ahead and writing it with the 3 tranches current, I mean, while we're doing this, I mean, especially when you're revising, you're asking for the state statute to be, you better think about it a long time down the road, because that's not an easy process.
So are you saying, Councilmember Lamb, are you saying do it here, this is first, then we roll to this, then if that's not possible, we roll to the next thing? I think that makes sense. What do the rest of you think? Yes. And I think we can just ask Roger to do this by consensus. Is there anybody who doesn't want this? Because we'll need to look at it again. Is the July meeting, does that work for you, Roger?
Yes, Mayor. I guess my question was, if we move to this alternate system, did we want to move to continue with an election system, or more of an appointment system, but requiring the mayor to query interest from that particular class of persons and appoint from those groups before they would appoint from general citizenship, as opposed to keeping an election system for those 3 seats. Because obviously we don't do an election of the council members for the board. They're
The mayor harasses them till they say yes.
I'm just trying
I'm
to think, maybe
teasing,
simplify
right?
the clerk's life in the future and not do like the outside elections. I mean, I think the only other board, we do it for the police and fire, but obviously that's a larger group of people for the retiree type seats on those than we have here. I don't know if we wanted to stick with an election from that group and then only move to an appointment system if nobody in that group is unwilling to serve, or just simply trying to get the permission of the legislature to once retirees seats are unfillable by election, that we move to an appointment system that require the mayor to select, query those groups for interest, and then select from people that are willing to serve in the dependents and beneficiaries. And then if no one in that group is, the mayor would appoint from general citizenship.
I mean, I'm sorry. Does somebody have their hand up? I've missed it.
I wanted to see what Charlene had to say.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I certainly think that if any retiree wants to serve, they ought to be given the first option. And I think the tier situation that you mentioned to me would be a better solution to give the actual retiree, which probably there may not be any, but if there is, I think we should give them first option and then move to the next level, if that's possible to do legally.
Yes, I think we ought to stick with the election system and then only move away from it incrementally. It may come to a point where that if there's like still enough retirees that still want to run, that's why I tried to write in the term of 1 or more seats, that maybe we could move away from that system. You might have 2 seats that you could fill by election, but one of the seats, there's no longer a third candidate. Then we move to that system seat by seat as the time, so that the retiree always gets that wanted to serve would always have the ability to be on the board.
Yeah,
even if
I would agree.
One person that nominated and one person voted for themselves, they would get that last seat.
right.
Yes,
That
I
makes-
agree.
Mm-hmm. Any other comments about all this? So, Roger, you mentioned something I was not going to bring up, but now I am, since you mentioned it. Do you have any history, or does anyone, Susan, you may have history with this, I'm not sure. Do we have any history about why, when this pension no longer has any beneficiaries of any kind, the pension fund itself rolls into the police and fire pension? Is it because it was pension, or is it other reasons? Does anybody know? Do you know, David? Councilmember Kloiber?
Yeah, I believe that it was passed at the state level to allocate that for this particular year.
Well, I know that, but I want to know why. Do
Oh,
we know why they chose to do that?
I think because they were asked.
I mean,
That's it. I think that it could have gone anyway, but I think that they were asked to do it, so that's where it got to. At least that's my understanding.
Yes, Councilmember Lamb.
This board was never consulted in that capacity.
That's what I wondered.
I believe
Right.
I believe you are correct on that. Yes.
I know I'm correct because I was actually on here when it happened.
And what year would that have been?
The
15,
statute, the last time
16.
it was amended was 2018, so I believe it may have been the 2018 session, if I'm not mistaken. It was either 2017 or 2018, I believe.
So it's very recent.
Mhm.
And so what did it say before that? Does anybody know?
Went back to the general fund, went to us.
It did
Uh-huh.
go back to the general fund.
Mhm.
I
Okay,
don't recall, Mayor, but I can pull up a prior version of the statute and inform the board the next meeting. I can't recall.
if I recall, when we talked about this before, when this pension rolls into the police and fire, it does not count as a contribution. It simply adds to the pension. And Aaron knows this, Commissioner Hensley. This week we had our police and fire pension board meeting, and it is now 88% funded and is almost at $1 billion. And so we have really fixed that fund, and it will continue to, you know, given if everything, fingers crossed, the stock market holds, right? And all the investments hold. But I just wonder about this. If at some point we need to, I mean, to me, it doesn't seem right. I'll just say that, that it would roll into the other pension. But I may be the only person who feels that way. And if we're going to go to the General Assembly to have other changes, what you just said, Roger, is what I'm wondering about. Of course, this may not be this is probably not the legislature to do it. Councilmember Lamb?
I am totally in agreement with you, and it is very, it angers me to know that this was done without consultation with this board, and the fact that it actually took the money away from the government's general fund, because the people that have managed this money at a 200% funding level should be the ones that are able to utilize it at the time that it becomes available. So,
any other thoughts? I mean, I'm presuming police and fire went and got it done. Is that right, Councilmember Kloiber?
Yes.
Without.
Yes, I think it was just yes, I think you are correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
yes, Charlene.
I was just going to say, I know when I first came on the board, not too far after that, there was a discussion about the fact that this had been done. And there were only like 2 people on the board that day that knew anything about it. This board, to my knowledge, as a board, had never been even advised that this was happening. And I guess, you know, we didn't have any people at the legislature, so it just happened without any say-so from this board.
Mm-hmm. That's how things sometimes happen in Frankfurt.
That's very true.
Well, I mean, maybe this is a discussion for another day. You know, at some point, the police and fire pension will be 100% funded, and it could be very soon, right, Commissioner? I mean, and then I don't know what happens to that pension, whether you know, this is maybe more complicated than we want to talk about today, but I think we need it on our radar. And I'm not sure that the current legislature would be disposed to make any kind of a change at this point. Councilmember Lamb?
there has been discussion on this board over the last, well, probably not this past year, but prior to that even, where we have discussed that maybe it's an opportunity for us to look at the existing retirees and their spousal, the beneficiaries, and perhaps maybe go ahead and give them some additional funds from this, since it is 200%. So I think that what I would like to see in this conversation is that if we could look at options, and I think we've had this conversation before, of options where what we could do as far as giving some somehow giving more money to the existing retirees. I mean, obviously you're not going to spend out the entire glorious amount of money, but I would like to see that. And if that's, and since we're going to be coming back in person, Ms. Lang would be able to be back, and hopefully we'll be able to get a third person retiree to share in this conversation. And I think maybe in July or the next meeting after that, if we could have some options about that, please.
Okay, and we did, if I remember correctly, last year we increased the allocation to the beneficiaries, correct? Do I remember that?
I think that it was a one-time
Yes.
percentage, and it was considerably less than what had been done in the past. One other time there had been it was, I don't know how it was figured, but it was figured a different way. It wasn't on a percentage basis like that, but it was considerably different. But I agree that everybody that is on this board and has beneficiaries that are part of the retirement system, I mean, should be the people to benefit from this. And well, just to be blunt, it really shouldn't be any concern of police and fire until we're all dead and gone. And I think that that was not a very fair thing to do, to give this pension board no voice in that. But then that's hindsight, nothing we can do about it.
Well, we don't know about that, right? If we can't do anything about it. But yes, Councilmember Kloiber.
Thanks, Bear. If I understand, I don't think your idea is too off base or should be thrown out just because of who's in Frankfurt right now. If we're already going to the General Assembly, I say throw it in there. You know, we're the ones who've been stewarding it. I mean, only a few of us for a very short time. I'll say most of you have been stewarding it for much longer than we have. But if we're the stewards now, then we have consensus that we don't feel that this is the way it should go. Do you see a harm in us throwing the ask in with the rest of it? Because I don't, you can't get anything if you don't ask, is basically, and then we can deal with Councilmember Lamb's proposals if we can't remedy this solution in the first place. I think that'd be my order of operations if everyone else was amenable.
I like that. All they can say is no. I would not want the whole thing to get killed because of one piece. But I like your line of thinking. Commissioner Hensley?
If the inclination is for it to be in the police and fire pension fund, at least in lieu of our normal contributions, it's splitting the hair a different way. It's the same thing. But our contribution to the police and fire pension fund budgeted for next year is $32 million. So if this is, any portion off of that, it still benefits the general fund in that way. But it still puts the contribution in police and fire pension while not drawing any extra ire there, potentially.
So that's another option.
Option, right?
So, yes, David, join right in.
Yeah. In regards to the last increase, I don't remember all the mechanics, but I thought we actually increased the base monthly stipends every single month on a permanent basis, as opposed to it just being a one-time payment. And when we were going,
yes.
Okay. And when we were going into that discussion, and this is for Councilmember Clover, we were concerned that the police and fire would actually veto or object to that increase. So I'm wondering if we might want to try to get the increase passed first before going to Frankfurt, because then it's like, if they don't object there, then we could get that resolved rather quickly and then take other actions. But if they object to that, then you have even more ammunition on why you would like to have that change at Frankfurt. Just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think it would be that one is more desirable than the other. The increase is just as the secondary backup to try and rectify some of this. And the primary concern is that without consulting this body, it was shifted where this was going to go. So I think that while I think you have a really good point there about where the contentious areas might be, Commissioner Hensley's point that we can frame it in a way that doesn't move it away from fire and and police, but allows us to help the general fund in that way. So it kind of does what it was originally supposed to do without appearing to be too contentious.
Yes. And Commissioner, did you want to say something else?
I was just asking about the objection. When David, when you said police and fire objected, what grounds? What grounds did they have to object?
They did not object, but in terms of, I think we spent 2 or 3 meetings talking about that being a concern. And Councilman Lamb probably could liken, but that was, I was very surprised that on the amount of time that we talked about that, but we were basically spending time. It's like, okay, what would happen under those circumstances? And we actually presented an increase in order to make it palatable so that it would run smoothly when it was presented to council. So I think in terms of, we were considering higher increases, but that was such a concern that we basically limited the amount of the increase because of those concerns.
Interesting.
Okay, so we have several things going on here. We have that we'll need to maybe, if it's your pleasure, put on the docket, or not on the docket, but on our agenda. The first thing we need to attend to is to formally ask, or by consensus, ask Roger to come back to us in July with those changes that we've talked about with his pieces of the 2 different documents. So Roger, do you understand what's been expressed about those 2?
I think so. I think there's been some broad discussion. So what I'm going to try to do is just put a couple of different versions out there so the board can look at a couple of different ways. When we talked about elections and appointments, I may try to stick one that just sticks with kind of an election format, and the other kind of goes to a hybrid election. Appointment as the seats for the setting retirees can't be filled. And we can just kind of work through that and then come up with something. Again, we have a little bit of time here because I don't think if we were going to go to the General Assembly, I think probably as long as we have our ducks in a row by November or so. So we've got some time to think about the statutory language. As far as the ordinance, my understanding is you'd like me to get with the council clerk and kind of work through more of the mechanics of what some of their concerns are, what they've kind of experienced, just trying to get these elections pushed forward, and maybe come up with a little bit of an alternative language there, or just maybe a broader catch-all that does its best to cover any contingency, just to try to make it so we don't have to continue to do special elections if we don't have to.
Okay, let's go ahead and put that in the form of a motion to ask Roger to come back to us next meeting. If someone would make a motion, please.
So move.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Any further discussion on that part? Yes, Councilmember Lamb.
I'm reading in here, and I guess I never did pay attention that the authorized group or class of person is one. I didn't realize it was identified in the KRS. So it's amazing when you read these things over again, what you see. So there is no way that we could just amend our section 6-49. It has to go back to the state statute, and I guess I missed that.
Yeah, but that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
I think that's fine.
Yes, the last time, Councilman Lamb, when we amended the ordinance, if you look at the bottom of 649, essentially we put in there that if any such time one or more of the 3 retiree trustees can't be filled due to an insufficient number of persons willing to serve, that it'll be filled from an authorized group or class of persons as authorized in the statute 67A, and that if no alternate group or class is changed, the seat remains vacant. We added that language last time because we knew we had that problem with the statute. And as you may recall, we talked about pursuing a statutory amendment back then, but there was a concern about approaching the General Assembly during those pension reform years. And that's why that language was added to the ordinance, and we didn't go forward back then.
Okay. Thanks for that recollection. It's it's been a long path here. Thank you.
Okay, so anything else on that motion? Everybody in favor of asking Roger to come back and do those things next month? Anybody opposed? All right, that motion passes. Now, I also heard a desire on the part of some folks to look at perhaps increasing the benefit. I think that's what I heard, to our beneficiaries. So is that something you would like to have on our agenda for July?
Yes, please.
Because, okay, so, thank you for the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Baxter. Now let's have some discussion. I think it will be good to have some sort of framework for this in July. What are your thoughts on the motion? Commissioner Hensley, this will be a financial kind of thing. Would you, do you have any thoughts?
Being new to the board, Mayor, I'm not really sure what options we've looked at for increasing in the past. But I think obviously looking at precedent is always a good place to start. So I would be interested in seeing when we've done increases in the past, how we determined at what rate to set that and exploring that option.
Okay. Who has that? Do you have that, Susan or Samantha, or who has the history of any increases?
I mean, I have everything that I have from when I came on the board in 2015 or so, but I mean, Samantha and Abby, you guys will have the substantiating information that was in the packets that was brought before to be introduced and for discussion purposes.
Could we go back farther than 2015? I mean, I don't know what the history is. Do we, Susan? Are you saying no or yes?
No, I'm just thinking that I don't think we ever did any other increases to the retirees until probably when Susan Lamb came on. I think we've done two. One was very detail oriented, is how I will nicely say it. The second one I think was just like a flat 4% increase. So I think there's only been 2 times that the actual retirees in this fund got an increase over the.
Okay, so was one what we just did a year or 2 ago?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And it looks like, I think it was just a 4% increase across the board.
Yes. Okay.
And from our discussion, I sort of vaguely remember that the prior one was just a one-time payment, as opposed to actually increasing the level of benefits, which was a little surprising in terms of, so that was why there was a lot of discussion, hesitation about even asking for an increase last time.
Yeah, that one was more detailed because it gave the widows less money, and then the retirees, depending on how many years of service they had, they got more money. So it was a very detailed structure.
Okay, so who can bring us the 2 that happened, and you know how much they went up and some of the detail? Is that?
I'm thinking between me, Samantha, Abigail, and probably Susan Lamb, we should be able to get everything they need.
Okay.
And the other thing is always to remember for everybody that, because we do have so many new people, that they have a annual COLA that's built into the section 6 dash, and I don't remember the exact section in our code of ordinances. So, and I think it's 3%.
Yes, ma'am.
So just so everybody understands that they get that every year, which is a wonderful thing. But thank you. I just
okay, that's a good point. Okay, so anything else on this one? I think July will be a good time to talk about that and take a good close look at it. Does that work for you, Charlene?
Yes.
You're not going to say no, are you?
No, no, ma'am.
Okay, so all those in favor of the motion to put this on our agenda in July, raise your hand, please. All right, thank you. Anybody opposed? All right. Now, the other issue as far as where the pension goes, when there are no beneficiaries left, do you, we don't want to load up July too much, but what's your, we don't have another meeting till October, but we could always call a special meeting, I guess. What's your pleasure about that? I think we're going to need some information for full discussion.
Will we be able to, if we're talking about trying to bundle this to go to the assembly all at once, will we be able to get the information from Roger in July and then not send anything to the assembly until much later? I mean, I'm just trying to make sure the timing is right. I'm not wanting to overload July, but if we are on the timing constraint to try and bundle them, would it be necessary for us to talk about it at the same time?
Do you think, Roger?
Mayor, I'm not that sure about the process, but I thought typically as long as we can get any type of legislative proposals to potential sponsors by about November, December, is that typically the time frame that we usually look at for different boards and commissions?
Yes, that's when we usually do that. And I think it would be really good when we have this discussion to have the history. Don't you?
I can get the version, the prior version of the statute and have that included in the packets to see if there's been any more than one change or what the statute originally said. To be honest with you, I can't recall if it even addressed that issue prior to this amendment. I'll have to look back and see. I really don't want to speak out of turn on that.
Well, and would there be any legislative history? Do they, I mean,
I can look. Kentucky has very limited, they have legislative records and daily journals, but typically, unless there was some sort of debate or discussion that you could get off of the LRC, just the floor, kind of like our GTV3, you're probably not going to have a lot of
public.
It's not like federal legislation where there's a lot of discussion about this.
Right. Well, and I could ask Judy Taylor if she has any of that history. I don't know. She would have been here.
She knows.
And she would know. Yes, Commissioner.
I am happy to call former Commissioner O'Mara as well.
Oh, good idea.
And ask him. He has a wealth of knowledge. And I actually believe that Councilmember Bledsoe has mentioned it a couple of different times, so she may have more history as well.
Okay. Okay, that'll be great to ask Bill. Yes, Councilmember Lamb.
I was wanting to know more about, when we have this discussion, what Aaron was talking about, there being some way to, about the annual payments to the police and fire pension. I have said this until I'm purple in the face probably, that I wanted to have some consideration of that taken for those annual payments. And so I would like to know more about that, the possibilities and what that would look like, given the fact of what our, obviously we still have 41 members that are receiving their retirement or stipend out of this, but I think we have kind of an idea of what we're talking about, the amount of money. And so I would like to know more about what that would look like as well during this discussion, because I think that's where to focus on. So
that might be more doable, right? So is that something, Aaron, that you could get just kind of a bullet point framework for us to consider?
Sure.
Okay. What else? Any other thoughts about this particular one? All right, so we will, let's go ahead and, do we have a consensus on all this to put this on our, we can start with our July agenda as Councilmember Kloiber suggested, and then if we need more time on it, we'll take more time. Okay, all right.
Sorry, Mayor, I just wanted to clarify, did that one need a motion for the pension discussion, or just wanted on the agenda for July?
Well, since there's no legislation that we're looking at, like the drafts that we've looked at on the others. I don't know that it needs a motion since we're sort of vague about it. But we do want it on the agenda to start looking at it, I think is what I've heard.
I'll add it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Well, I think we've thrashed through that enough, Roger. Do you?
Yes, Mayor.
All right. Well, David, you've been very patient through all of this. And so now we are to your part, investment review.
Okay. Great. In terms of how much time do we have in terms of, should I try to make this a more abbreviated report?
I will ask the board members, probably a little abbreviated would be helpful. I don't know that.
Okay.
And I apologize. If we were already to a little after 11, is that all right with you, board members? Do a little bit of an abbreviated, and I know, David, we can always get in touch with you for questions too.
Yes, of course. So
Okay,
in terms of, I'll try to give it a little bit of a quicker high level overview, but you have all the materials in the packet. So if there are any detailed questions that you would like to ask, feel free to ask them. So the overall snapshot, this is for the period ending March 31st, 2021. So we prepare these materials in around about middle of April. So it's a little stale in terms of, we're talking about 2 months later. But for the March 31st period, the return-seeking portfolio generated a total return of 2.75%, which was 91 basis points ahead of the benchmark. The return-seeking portfolio itself increased in market value by $670,000. Meanwhile, the liability defeasing portfolio for the period between January and March, we saw a very sharp increase in interest rates. So the market value declined by about $385,000, and meanwhile, there was about $261,000 that was dispersed from the liability defeasing portfolio. There was one significant change within the overall portfolio strategy, and that was in March, we decided to add an exposure to REITs, real estate investment trusts, and slightly reduce the allocation to U.S. domestic equities as well as fixed income instruments. Overall, as of March 31st, the pension fund had assets totaling $35.68 million, and it was diversified across equity securities as well as fixed income securities. The return-seeking portfolio, so that's the component that contains equities, was allocated about 66% to equity components and then 33% allocated to fixed income components. When you include the liability defeasing portfolio, which is all fixed income, you can see that it's about half-half split between fixed income and domestic equities. When you're looking at a equity portfolio for the 12 months ending March 31st, it's just amazing in terms of how much market value gains that have been realized. For the 12-month period, the return-seeking portfolio generated a return of 35.3%, which resulted in the return-seeking portfolio increasing in market value by $6.6 million. So in terms of, we talked about before that the fund was overfunded. We continue to have very impressive results because of the broader gains in the stock market. In fact, the combined portfolio increased over the 12-month period by 22% in total. So what are some of the challenges and headwinds that we're facing in the economy? This is, as I mentioned, somewhat dated information as of April 12th. The efforts to combat COVID-19 here in the United States has been exceptional in terms of the number of new cases has decreased quite significantly. On a rolling 7-day basis, we're only at about 14,400 cases. And this was basically the lowest level throughout the entire pandemic. We only saw earlier lower numbers when there was probably not enough testing going on in order to figure out who had COVID versus those that did not. Additionally, The number of people that are fully vaccinated continues to increase. In terms of, there's about 42% of the entire population that is fully vaccinated here in the United States. And that number might seem a little bit low, but you still have about 25% of children that aren't even eligible for the vaccine. So when you're looking at the entire population set, you can only really get to 70% right now because there are so many children that aren't even eligible for the vaccine. In regards to domestic growth, there has been a very sharp rebound. 12 months ago, we were spending a lot of time talking about whether or not this is going to be a V-shaped recovery or an L-shaped recovery. Basically, a V-shaped recovery was that, okay, we're going to have abysmal growth for some period of time, just for 3 or 6 months, and then everything is going to rebound sharply. During the first quarter of 2021, we were expecting estimates of growth at about 5%. We saw just continuous improvement in forecasts from November to December to January. And the actual growth rate in the first quarter was 6.4%, basically just blowing away expectations. GDP growth during 2021 is supposed to be north of 6%. This is the strongest level that we've seen in multiple decades. So this is a very remarkable transition in terms of last year showed a contraction. We entered into a recession, but it was a very short-lived recession. We continue to see money being pumped into the local economy by the federal government. This has resulted in significant deficits being realized. During the fiscal year 2020, the U.S. budget deficit, this is just on a one-year basis, was $3.1 trillion. If you compare that to the prior years, fiscal years 2016 to 2019, they were about $1 trillion. We're going to see another huge deficit. This particular yellow line just goes to March and doesn't include the funds that were released as part of the American Rescue Plan. The American Rescue Plan is tacking on another $1.9 trillion, and those monies were going out to state and local governments beginning the middle of May. All this is basically providing extra fuel, extra growth into the economy in order to make us recover from those levels from earlier. The unemployment rate continues to improve. As of March, it was 6%. The latest reading had the unemployment rate at 5.8%, with 559,000 jobs being created in the month of May. Even though these are definitely great improvements, we still have about 7 million less jobs than in February of 2020 prior to the COVID pandemic. So more room to continue to grow and improve. Interest rates, as I've alluded to, have increased sharply. Inflation expectations have increased. I'm not sure if any one of you are in the market for a new home, but if you're trying to add an addition, lumber prices are at the highest levels ever. So if you're buying a 2x4 or plywood, you'll be shocked at the prices at Home Depot and Lowe's. This has basically increased the cost of building residential homes by a remarkable amount in terms of, for an average size home in the $250,000 range, the increase in lumber prices has basically resulted in that cost going up by about $30,000. So lumber prices is adding to inflation, and that has helped driven up yields across the curve. So far, 2021 continues to be remarkable gains in the stock market. This particular chart goes through March 31st, 2021, and we were showing 6.2% year-to-date gains. As of yesterday, the S&P 500 for the year was up 13.6%. So we see another continued gain for the particular quarter starting from April, 7% quarter to date. So if you're looking at your retirement accounts, you should be pretty pleased because they continue to show great gains with very, very limited volatility or downside risk. If you are a fixed income investor, the story is quite the opposite in terms of the Federal Reserve has basically said that because of the disruptions in the market and uncertainty going forward, they're going to keep the interest rates low. So overnight rates, bank deposits, CDs, you're going to see sub 1% rates for the foreseeable future. And you probably will see sub 50 basis point rates. This particular chart basically surveys all the board members of the Federal Reserve, and each dot represents where they think the federal funds target rate ought to be at the end of each of the calendar years. So for 2021, everyone is completely unanimous that they're not changing rates for the next 6 months. Going into 2022, so as of December 31st, 2022, we see that there's only 4 outliers, and those 4 outliers just showed a slight increase in rates, either 1 or 2 increases. And even in 2023, there really isn't consensus that rates are going to be sharply higher as well. So this low rate environment where money market funds are yielding 1 or 2 basis points, 1-year investments are yielding less than 25 basis points is likely going to continue to persist. All this speaks well for the stock market and exposure to the stock market, because this type of environment basically incentivizes taking on risk because even some of the dividend yields on high quality companies is significantly higher than what you could obtain through fixed income investments. So going into the return seeking, yes,
David,
go ahead.
Would this be a good place for any questions before you go into the next part?
Sure.
If
yes.
there are any. I don't know that anybody has any questions, but so we can kind of break it up a little bit. Are there any questions? Okay, Councilmember Kloiber.
Yeah, just one quick question. It kind of ties into all of this. And, as we've seen, the fixed income's getting beat up right now. And we have these 2 separate funds, the liability defeasing and the return seeking fund. So I guess my question is, in the return seeking fund, we still have about a 30% allocation towards fixed income. Is that statutory or required, or what was the decision behind that, with already having the liability defeasing fund acting as that kind of buffer, right? We already have the fixed income fund that protects us and makes sure we make our payments. So it kind of feels like we're double dipping on the fixed income by having that much fixed income in the return seeking fund, and we're getting beat up on it right now. So I guess that's my question, where your head is at on that.
Sure. Carl Yassin's also on the line. Carl, do you want to speak in terms of at the initial inception of the engagement about developing the investment policy?
Yes, good morning, David. Good morning, everyone. I'm on the road. I hope everybody's doing well. I'm on the road, so I apologize if my line isn't clear or if my signal's weak. Please shut me up quickly, and David, I'm sure, can answer. But to respond to your question, Councilmember Kloiber, is when we were hired back in 2013 to help the pension fund figure out what is the best course of action. I think there were 4 different alternatives. One was to annuitize the fund altogether. The decision was made not to do that. We looked at several options, and what we ended up doing is by consensus in drafting the investment policy statement, we laid out 2 strategies. One was the LDI portfolio, as you stated, basically to defease the liability. And the other portfolio was to continue in a pension-like, sort of a traditional pension-like allocation, a 60-40. The consensus was there was no need to take excessive risk and be in a total equities portfolio. And just sort of research has shown that a 60-40 portfolio going back to 1970, I believe the data that we looked at, 1970 to 2000 and maybe 19, I believe, a 60-40 portfolio provided 90% of the upside that a 100% equity portfolio did, but obviously almost half the downside. So we didn't see a need to be all in equities. A 60-40 is a sweet spot and sufficient to withstand the ups and downs of the market while providing that growth, having at that time not really known what the objective of the fund was going to be, the surplus. Nobody really knew at that time what's going to happen to that surplus. Is it going to go back to the city's coffers? Is it going to go to some other And therefore a 60-40 was seen to be a reasonable approach. And the fixed, in addition, the fixed income in the return seeking is slightly different. It is a little bit slightly more longer duration, corporates and high yield, a little bit more diversified. So it is fixed income, but maybe, and you're right, very low returning over the next 5 years potentially, but should serve as a buffer to withstand shocks.
So I agree with your.
But
oh, sorry, David.
Yeah, in terms of just adding, in terms of your questions about whether or not it's regulatory statute, it's not. But in terms of the guidance that it's probably already been over 5 years ago that we were given, that was the parameters that were set. In terms of this particular board can basically direct us to have a more aggressive strategy. So in terms of if you say you want a 75-25 split, we can do that. We do provide that type of service for other clients, but this was more of a dialogue between this particular board and PFM on the level of risk that you're comfortable with. So in terms of if the risk appetite has increased, we are definitely more than willing to adjust the overall investment strategy. Yes, and I think the other thing to factor in is we are in historically low interest rates in terms of prior to 2015, when you thought about having a fixed income investment, yes, maybe returns and interest rates were low in the 3% range, but this sub 50 basis point, sub 1% rate has only really been there from 2008. And we thought that was just more of an anomaly because of the Great Recession. But now it seems like this may be the direction of the Federal Reserve for any type of temporary market disruption. Like we didn't think that just a small recession would cause the Federal Reserve to be that low. So
let's not go too far in the weeds. Let's just go with 60-40, because right now we're at like a 48-52 in fixed income across this entire thing. So I'm not necessarily saying that I would like this to be at a more aggressive stance, but I think that right now we're viewing the return seeking account and the liability defeasing account as two separate entities as opposed to one total entity. And if our risk appetite is 40 across this entire fund, then we need to treat the risk allocation across both of those as the same. That 60-40 number, that would be my interpretation.
So Councilmember Kloiber, just to further add, sorry, to David, just to further add to David's discussion, the change in strategy is welcome. If the board updates the investment policy, we would be happy to help you update the investment policy. However, the way it is today, the 60-40 is the target for the return-seeking portfolio separately, and the 100% cash matched LDI is for the LDI portfolio separately. So the investment policy lays out two separate strategies. So the 60-40 isn't combined.
I think you guys are doing exactly what you've been directed to. So that's don't worry about that. My question to this, when it was originally proposed to everyone, all of your discussions about 60-40 having, the 90% plus gains and not having as much risk, that's all true. But was it also explained that by creating the liability defeasing account as well, you are further increasing that to a point that it's no longer a 60-40 net overall? I guess that would be, was that explained? And if it was, that's fine. And I might want to ask the rest of the members of this committee if we could look at that just in adjusting it, because again, I think 60-40 is a great allocation for a pension type fund. But I think that saying 60-40 in our return plus 100% in our defeasing puts us over 50% in fixed income, which, who knows how long these interest rates are going to stay low. That's going to be something that's going to be going on.
And your points are exact, like I think in terms of your points are exactly well taken. Basically, as you've already alluded to, how we sort of treat it because of the unique nature of this particular pension fund, was that we would set aside everything that was necessary in order to pay the beneficiaries for the life of the pension, and essentially put into a separate account, a separate overall strategy, and given the high quality nature, that there would be essentially very little risk in terms of credit defaults, and there would be no concern, basically, it's like very nil to the pensioners and the beneficiaries that there won't be funds available to pay off all of their expected benefits. That would definitely have lowered the overall expected returns. But at the end of the day, like, since there was very limited upside for the pensioners, and the primary objective is to protect the pensioner benefits, like, the board felt comfortable doing that. But your point that the overall composition and risk profile of the pension as a whole as being less aggressive than 60/40, we completely agree with. So in terms of, we're comfortable to basically keep the liability defeasing portfolio focused on covering all the pension benefits, but on the return seeking portfolio, if you want to increase and have, let's say, 75 or even 80/20, we're comfortable doing that. So that's just kind of a discussion in terms of for the other members.
Yeah,
Well,
David, just to add real quick.
I'm so sorry if I could interrupt here. This could be a future discussion. Let me tell you what we're doing with the police and fire pension. We are having our regular discussion of reallocation. And what we are doing, we're doing it over a period of about 2 months, and having an in-depth discussion of which of our funds are higher risk, which are lower risk, which are medium risk, so that the full board understands exactly how we allocate and whether this is where we want to be. So if this board wants to have this discussion, I think it would be perfectly good. But this is not a discussion we can have today, because we will need a lot more information from PFM about every fund and its risk, is my opinion. I might be the only one that thinks that.
I think we do.
But, it's a really good discussion to have.
I just wanted to point out, the overall composition is not in line with 60/40.
Yes.
And that's not the directive that was given to PFM to do. So I understand this is not a judgment. I just wanted to point out that if our goal is to get to that kind of allocation, it's not necessarily going through single line item, let's look at each fund. It's just, we can look at that allocation going forward. So I wanted to bring that up to everyone's attention.
I think it's a great point, and it sounds like we have not looked at allocation lately in terms of making different decisions. So I think it's a great point.
Mayor, this is Khalid Yassin.
Commissioner Hensley.
I was just wondering, Mayor, since I'm new to this board, the Police and Fire Pension Group has a subcommittee that looks at this. Yes. Does this group have something similar, and would that be something that we're interested in doing?
We do not have a subcommittee, and I would ask our board if they want to do that, because the Police and Fire Pension Subcommittee is going to come back with some recommendations for allocation.
Yes, ma'am.
And we can, we can let Khalid and David finish their presentation and then see if we want to think about whether you want to have a subcommittee to do that. That's a great idea.
And we're very comfortable. One of the unique things about the State Employee Pension Fund is that it is overfunded. Yeah. And I think if you did a survey of the number of overfunded pensions across the country, I think you might be able to count them on on one hand. Yeah. Yeah. So it's just extremely unique. And in terms of, if there was a gap in terms of that you were only 88% funded, we would want to probably pursue a more aggressive strategy in order to minimize that gap and not let it grow.
David, let me just, sorry, I'll have to just interject. I'm really sorry. So the revisiting of the asset allocation for any institutional investor is advisable. It's typically done once a year. However, I just want to clarify, to David's point, this pension plan is very unique in the sense that it is so overfunded. If you looked at 100% fixed income portfolio, it will be sufficient, despite the low interest rates, despite not beating inflation. It would be sufficient to meet all benefit payments. And the fiduciary duty of a pension plan board is to ensure a minimal risk portfolio to meet those benefit payments. So that's why you can make an argument for 100% fixed income portfolio that will do the job. So in this sense, it was never the intention to have an overall allocation of 60-40. However, we would be happy to come back, whether to a subcommittee or a different body, just to sort of look at different modeling. And you will find any modeling that we do is going to show you that the pension benefits will be expected to be paid completely, whether you go with 100% fixed income or 100% equity or something in between. In that sense, we don't have an issue with the asset allocation, but we would be happy to present different modeling and explore different allocations that the board is comfortable with. But I just wanted to emphasize that 100% fixed income would be sufficient to meet the benefit payments in the future at a minimal risk portfolio. And so you really have a lot of flexibility in this portfolio.
Great, thank you for that. Just one more point, we're going to lose our quorum in 15 minutes. So whatever we do has to finish in 15 minutes because technically we can't meet without a quorum.
Okay.
So here we go.
Is there any more discussion in terms of we are more than welcome to take the direction of this board. So it's not that we're defensive. It's just like, I think where we have always come back to is that what is the terminal value? It's like, who's going to really benefit? So taking on additional equity risk, if it doesn't benefit the current pensioners, the beneficiaries, like why take on that additional risk? And that's where we sort of always come back to, like, okay, we could increase more equity exposure, but who really benefits in that case?
Thank you.
And that goes back to our earlier discussions. So.
Thank you. Is there, did you want to present a few more minutes and then we'll see where we are?
I think that sort of covers everything. If you go on to slides 40 and 41 in the deck, you can see the various individual managers in both the domestic equity, international equity space, and on a quarterly basis, it's on 38 and 39. And you could just see some of the impressive returns for the last year. For example, small cap doubled in returns, 119%. Now, in terms of compared to the benchmark, we're still at 95%. But it was just an extremely impressive year. I don't think many at this time of March of last year thought we would have this sharp V-shaped recovery where basically the U.S. is humming along and we could have in-person meetings because the majority of Americans already received a vaccine. So, any other questions?
Any other questions?
That was in my prepared remarks.
What other questions do you have? Any? We've put enough out there to give food for thought. And of course, thinking for the long term is what we're doing, right? Beyond this year, 10 years from now, et cetera. Okay, well, David and Khalid, thank you so much. We really appreciate your presentation. Sorry it was a little rushed, but this is a group that's all thinking. So our next item, I'm not exactly sure where we are on this, David, the investment training orientation review. Okay, Commissioner Hensley knows.
I would like to just speak to that. I did watch the videos and I thought they were immensely helpful. Really, really a great synopsis in just 53 minutes. So, I think it was done very well, and I do appreciate you all sending that out to everyone, especially since we have quite a few new members, myself being one of them. So I want to send my appreciation Khalid and David for that. I really do appreciate it.
And if board members haven't had an opportunity, I think they're still out there, aren't they? You can, did everybody get the link? I think it got sent out widely. So thank you very much for that. I think that's really great. I'm not sure police and fire pensions ever had that, Commissioner. So we'll have to think about that. Okay, we are coming to the end of our agenda. You see the 2021 meeting schedule with the next meeting being on July 27th, and this group has voted to have that in person. So we're hoping very much that we will have a quorum, and maybe by then Samantha and Abby and everybody will have another board member to propose. So are there any other issues for the good of the whole? Yes, Commissioner.
Mayor, I don't believe I'll be at the July 27th board meeting. And so I don't know if we lose quorum at that point. Hopefully our additional retiree, hopefully we can get a hold of Ms. Lang, and she'll be able to be in person with us. But I just wanted to let everybody know while we were here.
Okay. Is there anyone else who knows that they can't be here on the 27th? It sound of July. It sounds like we might lose our quorum.
Mayor, there's a chance that I won't be able to make that meeting either.
Okay. Councilmember Lamb, you had your hand up.
I was just trying to understand, isn't John Maxwell, he's a voting member, correct?
Yes, but he wasn't able to be here today.
Okay, I was just trying to account in my head how many other voting members we have in addition to the retirees, and I was having a brain bubble.
If we're missing two, we'll be missing Commissioner Hensley and probably Councilmember Baxter. Then we need John and someone else.
If John and Gay both can make it, then that would substitute.
So Samantha, you'll let us know well enough ahead.
Yes, Mayor. I like to try to get quorum about 2 weeks out. So
right. Okay.
hopefully it'll stay.
All right. Very good. Okay. Is there anything else? Thank you to all of you. I really appreciate your thoughtfulness about all of this. And again, David and Khalid, thank you. We're always depending on you to educate us and keep us healthy. So if there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Our last Zoom, maybe.
Moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you so much. Have a good month. We'll see you next month. Some of you.
Thank you.